A story that came across our desk a little bit earlier today, and we've talked about it in the news, is that New South Wales Cancer Council has hit out at the state government for both taking junk food advertisers' money, but also trying to hit back and stop childhood obesity. And this is our jumping off point for taking stock today. We're joined by Angela Vathulkas, founder of Australia's Small Business Party, and Greg Baxter, partner at Newgate Communications. Thank you both for being with us. An interesting story. I mean, is it contradictory to do both things? What do you think, Angela?
Well, public health policy is extremely difficult to deliver and to implement. So childhood obesity is something that the government is actively fighting or trying to recognise how serious it is and make a difference in lives moving forward, because obviously there's not only a health problem and a social conscience there, but it's a cost to the taxpayer in the long run. So it does seem rather ironic that these public infrastructures do tend to take advertising dollars from anyone. And the question is, should the government set by example or lead by example and have criteria as to who or what they will allow advertising dollars or revenue to come from? And of course, that's already happened via tobacco and alcohol. Is this next step now outlawing twisties, Doritos, sugary drinks, etc., without naming other big brands? And it really is an issue where any parent or caregiver that's been with a young child standing watching advertising going past, it does kind of spark the imagination of, I want a Happy Meal. So yes. I think it's a difficult issue, public health, and it is something we need to address.
Do you have a problem with the messaging as a communications expert, Greg?
Well, I think, where does it stop? These products are legal.
I know.
And I was on the way here, I drove past a bus shelter. There was an advertisement for Gordon's Gin on the bus shelter.
Yes, I know.
So you've got alcohol.
The hot cost of alcohol problems to the health system is huge.
Advertising is everywhere.
Yeah, well, I have a problem with that. But
right, so it's a question to my mind, you know, these products are legal. So how are you going to regulate them in other ways? And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be regulated in other ways, but it would seem to me that if you take this kind of product away, this kind of advertising away from state infrastructure, there's a very good argument for doing the same in a bunch of other categories. It might be more sensible to look at taxing these industries in more creative ways so that they are making a contribution, financial contribution directly to deal with the consequences of the products that they're manufacturing. Which
they then pass on to the consumer, and it's usually those in the poorer income category. You're talking about something like sugar tax.
Well,
yeah, and then the small business can't pass those costs on to the consumer, and then they just get crunched.
It's not about money,
sugar
it's about
taxes.
leadership.
Sugar taxes have reduced consumption of the products that are taxed in all the countries where they now exist. There's about 30 countries around the world that have a sugar tax. And there are lots of arguments, obviously from the food and grocery lobby in particular, as to why a sugar tax is a bad idea, and neither the government or Labor support a sugar tax as it currently stands. But, you know, if you put the price of something up, consumption invariably goes down.
That's the case with cigarettes?
Absolutely.
Right. Big dent in those.
Well,
I think
cigarette consumption's down into the teens,
It has been significant, yeah.
Well, young people are picking it up, taking it up sooner as well.
But Angela, young people have lots of bad habits.
Yeah. I don't remember those, Greg. You might have a better memory.
And I was thinking we all ate Happy Meals as kids. I think we turned out just fine, most of us. But, you know, I don't know, not necessarily reflective of the broader... Yeah, exactly.
That's happening, and the accessibility to all of them. So childhood obesity is a very serious category. I think for me, it's all about leadership. I don't want a nanny state. I really don't want people telling me what I can and can't eat, and I don't want them saying, well, you shouldn't eat that, so the price should be double. But adults are capable of making better decisions. What we're saying is that circumstances now, and it's clear by our lifestyle behaviours, whether it's income or stress and pressure, both parents working, you know, falling to an easy option, bad habits, with kids picking up poor habits from a very young age, it's an issue.
Well, you say adults are capable of making good decisions. I mean, if that was true, obesity wouldn't be costing Australia $5 billion a year.
They are capable of making good decisions, but they are making a choice. With kids, it's a different kind of messaging, and it's not about policing, but it is about government having good leadership and leading the way in saying, yes, we do have a public health policy to try and fight and reduce childhood obesity, and one of the ways we're leading that is by having a good criteria for our public infrastructure. That doesn't stop private enterprise from advertising. It's just about public infrastructure.
But advertising of junk food is not allowed now on television during children's hours.
Well, except for, you know, KFC sponsors the cricket. If you wear the KFC bucket on your head and catch the ball, don't you get, you know, the prize? I mean, it's funny because it's...
You're right. I think a tax is the answer to it.
Yeah, I know. It gets messy. That's the point, isn't it? Because, I mean, I have a problem with, you know, KFC being all over the cricket, and yet, you know, I'm looking at those pictures we're just showing. I don't really have a problem with drumsticks, you know, on the billboards, because I kind of like drumsticks. You know, it doesn't make sense.
Too.
Like, who draws the line?
For me, it doesn't trigger necessarily
who draws the line?
an alarm and where's the flashing lights, but it is about good public health policy, and it should be about good leadership, and it shouldn't be about revenue for the government. I don't feel sorry for the government.
It's always about revenue for the government.
The other side of that is beating childhood obesity, which will cost us more in the long run.
So you've got to raise the revenue from somewhere.
Yeah, that's the problem. They've got to find it from somewhere.
So you've got to tax the sugar hit.
You've got to tax.
Or you've got to allow them to advertise on state infrastructure and use those funds to help fund your public health policy.
They're still allowed to advertise. They're still advertising on public infrastructure. It's just having a better criteria of what can be advertised on public. It's not wiping out public infrastructure.
Perhaps instead of an entire skin of the bus advertising for your favourite crunchy chips, maybe just a little ad, or having to pay more or something. I mean, this is the whole
a very large health warning and a small picture of the chocolate.
Maybe plain packaging for Doritos. Who knows?
My pantry has 2 shelves devoted to chips of all kinds, so I'm the last person to say. However, it's about public infrastructure and good public health policy. That's what I'm saying.
We had another interesting story that came across the desks today. The question here is, do we glorify hard work to the point of fault? It's been described... Brooke, you had the description, which was...
was it hustle porn?
Hustle porn.
Hustle
which
porn.
Is an unbelievable way to describe something. And that was described by Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. And this is an interesting kind of thing. This
also married to Serena Williams.
Of course.
People don't know who that is, but a tech entrepreneur who's, you know, quite glorified for all the, you know, success that he's had.
And he's trying to scale people back from work. He doesn't want this idea that we have to be in there for 12 hours a day to get the job done. So the question is, is this a big kind of cultural problem that we have? Greg,
Huge. I think it's enormous. I think I've worked for CEOs that were not just workaholics, but megalomaniacs with it. And they'd be on email at 4 in the morning, they'd be on email at 11 o'clock at night, they would actually set their emails up so that they could actually tell when you were looking, reading their emails.
To check if you were working at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning.
Precisely. And, you know, those people now are suffering from the consequences of overwork and have neglected their families and so on and so forth. I think, generally speaking, this relentless, largely American-driven drive to be competitive at all costs has had a huge social cost in Western democracies in particular, and Australia's picked up a lot of these habits, and they start sort of almost at MBA school and then they infiltrate the rest of the community. I don't think there's anything heroic about it. I actually think it's dumb. You know, one of the things that came out of this story is related, you know, Donald Trump makes a virtue of sleeping 4 hours a day. Yeah,
he was introducing one of the Senate candidates in the midterms on stage saying he only sleeps 4 hours a night. Look at this guy.
Who won, by the way?
He did win today. This is Mike Braun, praising him for that. And Donald Trump kind of brags about sleeping very little too.
Maybe if Donald slept a little more, we might all be.
But Twitter would be far less interesting.
I just don't think it sends a good message to anybody. I think working too hard has become a big problem for society broadly, because parents do neglect their kids, right? And I don't think there's any coincidence that the rapid increase in mental health issues among teenagers and what's happening with social media, you know, these things are all connected in some way. And the role modelling that they're getting from parents who are working too hard is not good role modelling, in my view.
We all know people who wear how much they work as a badge of pride. Angela, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm one of those people that probably doesn't get a lot of sleep because of my heavy workload. I don't expect my staff to follow suit. But the irony here, I think, is who is making this comment. You know, Alexis was a founder of Reddit. This was a website that was, you know, obviously very successful, very popular, but also heavily staffed by unpaid workers. So when he was making this comment, and these moderators who are in the subreddit categories, who would spend often 10 hours a day extra on top of their workload moderating Reddit, and giving of their own free will, obviously, their choice, and they weren't being paid for this, would have been in that category that he's describing as, you know, full of angst and abhorrent and hustle porn. So I find that a little bit ironic when he talks about that, because without all of these unpaid workers doing all of these extra hours, his business would never have flourished.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of irony.
But it's kind of that we're having this I understand. I think that's a really good point.
He didn't refer to them. He didn't refer to them. When he has this epiphany now, he never talks about these unpaid worker army that got him to where he's going. Now, specifically, this is about the tech industry in America and the culture of how they work. They get out of university, they're into six-figure jobs, and they're expected to work these ridiculous hours. But they come at this from a perspective of there's this huge pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that they are all going to be the next billionaire in the tech industry. And this is the online world, which is operating at such a frantic pace that it's literally 25 hours a day. And that is the only way, it appears, for this momentum to just match the pace, not outpace it. So unless they start introducing things like shift work, and actually have a cut-off period of when people, do finish work and pack it in. But it's that enthusiasm. Yes, people burn out. Now look at small business owners. Most of us as a small business owner probably work 15 hours a day at least. Most of us are pulling at least 6-day shifts, if not 7, because of our workload from the perspective of we can't afford to put on more staff. We don't wear it as a badge of honour. I promise you, I don't finish an 80-hour week and wake up and say, this is great, I can't wait to do another 20-hour day.
But to keep business going,
but what can you do if your overheads are there, if you've hit a hard patch, if you haven't got enough staff, if something has gone wrong, the buck stops with you, you carry the load. So unfortunately, unless you're on easy street and you're a billionaire or a millionaire and you can afford to come out with these great ideas about working less hours, well, when he's resolved the problem of lifestyle, empowerment, work-life balance, because I've yet to find that, when all of those things fit into nice categories and I can still achieve everything that needs to get done, then I'll be there.
Final word, Greg?
Look, 4 hours is not enough. I mean, it's the huge health consequences of not getting enough sleep. The only person that possibly got this right was Winston Churchill. 4 hours sleep a night, whiskey and cigars for breakfast.
So there is a way you can make it work for you.
The secret to your success, Greg.
Indeed.
Fantastic. And you can catch Greg tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. with a whiskey in hand. Thank you very much, Greg and Angela. Great to have you as always for taking stock.